one more time, so hopefully you can follow where I'm going here. The threshold will set the point in which something should happen in terms of volume. Ratio will determine, I'll say it in a different way, how much is to happen at that point. So that's another way of thinking about it. Now, ratios, they may be misunderstood with respect to compressors. So I am going to give you a quick overview of them. Let's say we had a ratio of 2:1, 2:1. So you turn your dial on your compressor to 2, and the other number will always be 1. Again, these represent decibels. Please listen very carefully, especially for those of you who may be more advanced, because sometimes this part goes by the wayside or maybe is not understood. The 2:1 ratio basically means that the number 2 is twice as much as the number 1. Pretty obvious, right? So if you were to have, let's say, sound that exceeds your threshold, and that sound was the total amount of 2 decibels, well, your compressor will bring it down to 1. Here's my question, though. What if sound that you have coming in on that track with the compressor is at 8 decibels? Where does the sound go? Where is it pulled back to? Because we're compressing, right? So the sound is being reduced. By how much? If you came up with the answer 1, you are incorrect. 1 decibel, that's not correct. What's happening is that it's actually being reduced down to 4, half of 8. Think about it. If you have a 2:1 ratio, an 8:4 ratio would be equivalent of that. And sorry, I'm taking you to math class here, but the math is the same on that. A ratio of 2:1 is the same thing as 8:4. Those relationships are the same, meaning one is double than the other. So anything that goes beyond your threshold will be reduced by half, not down to 1. So again, I've heard of some people getting that wrong. So I wanted to call that out very, very clearly. And if you do different ratios like 3:1 or 4:1, you can just simply do your math and you can figure out how much sound will be reduced after crossing that threshold, whatever you happen to set it at. All right, so let's talk about the various ratio options we have out there. When you're out there moving your ratio dial around, if you bring it up to 2:1, that anything below that is considered a gentle compression. It's a very light reduction of sound beyond your threshold, as I keep emphasizing. Anything that is up to 5:1 is considered more of a moderate or kind of a mid-level reduction in sound. So it pulls the sound down quite a bit beyond the threshold. Anything I would say beyond like 6 or 7:1, 8:1, those types of things, that's getting into more of the extreme compression. And what you're doing, once you get to that threshold, you're severely limiting your output of sound or the sound energy. I'm emphasizing the word limit there. So have you ever heard of a limiter or a brick wall limiter? Well, that concept is the same. I'm not going to go deep into it. So if that point is lost on you, don't worry about it. But for those of you who have heard about limiters or brick wall limiting, that is kind of the concept to where you'll tell sound you absolutely cannot go beyond this point, and your software or your outboard gear will be very inflexible in that regard. It will completely stop sound at a certain point. All right, so let's go back to these ratios that I just mentioned. When you are using a gentle compression, I personally like to use that on my overall mix. So when I'm getting to doing some finer mixing and mastering and things like that, specifically on the mastering side, I like to apply it to maybe some groups of instruments like my percussion section or to my master bus, because it gives me more of what they call a glued sound, where the volume of everything is kind of just gelled together, but is not rammed together. Where the ratios that are more mid-level, personally, I like to use them on things like the bass guitar or an acoustic guitar, or even a vocalist for that matter. Sometimes a vocalist is just way too up and down in terms of volume for my taste. And again, that's subjective. I may throw in more of a moderate compression. And then there are instances where I may go for a heavier compression. For instance, if I have, I have an 808 or something that I'm dropping into my mix and it's completely out of control, and the initial hit of that sound, that transient as it's called, is way out of control, I may want to bring in the compression to shave off some of that initial harshness or energy while preserving the rest of the sound as it trails off. All right, so as I've been going along, I realized that this is a lot of information and we've yet to get to attack, release, and gain. So let's do this. Let's take a break for this episode, and that'll allow you a bit of time to go back and start playing around with your compressor, and we can reconvene on the next episode for part 2 of compression. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast because we will be dropping that one next week. Yo, I appreciate you checking us out. Make sure you go back to successwithmusic.com, episode 44. Take a look at the graphic on my compression so you can get an idea as to what we're talking about. And then next week, we can pick it up and finish out the topic, and you'll be a lot sweeter in your editing game. Yo, check us next week, and you better hit that subscribe button right now. Subscribe right now. Do it.
I know there's gotta be a better way for me in this life.